Hello, I'm Gracen, and welcome to Tucker and my podcast on gender roles.
And I'm Tucker.
So Tucker, tell me a little bit about gender roles in the story Pride and Prejudice.
Prejudice, written by Jane Austen, is a story of a romance between the middle class and the proud upper class. The novel explores the perspective of gender and focuses on how male and female roles relate to the social definitions of these roles in the historical period. During this time, Englishmen were viewed as the stronger gender, with a higher regard within society, strong social graces, and the decision-makers. Women are seen as being submissive and unopinionated. The story of Pride and Prejudice, written by Jane Austen, illustrates the gender roles that existed in the 19th century society and how individuals within a society do not conform to these values.
Wow, how interesting, Tucker. Also, gender roles in Pride and Prejudice are very relevant throughout the story. Jane Austen utilizes different characters to emphasize the gender roles of the time. The introduction of Elizabeth Bennet is used to challenge the idea of women of that era being submissive and weak in comparison to men. On the other hand, when Fitzwilliam Darcy is introduced, he elicits the social expectations that men of the time embodied, which was wealth and power.
An example from the story comes from Elizabeth Bennet when she says, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. This truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters."
This quote embodies the idea that a rich man, either ill-favored or handsome, becomes the target of all society's mothers' attempts to get their daughters married off. Another quote comes from Charlotte, and she talks about how marriage had always been her object. It was the only honorable provision for well-educated young women of a small fortune.
Marriage is Charlotte's only option. Even being married to Mr. Collins is better than having to live with her parents or as an unwanted and permanent house guest with her brothers. With the information that comes from Pride and Prejudice, what do you think about today's society in regards to gender roles?
That during Jane Austen's time, the priorities of what life should be were very different in comparison to today. In the story, gender roles are shown through the actions and personalities of each individual character. And in today's society, gender roles do not have any boundaries. So Tucker, tell me about the current debate on gender roles in our society.
Well, Grayson, in today's society, the definition of gender roles has completely changed since Jane Austen's time. Gender is something that each individual person has the right to distinguish as their own. It is the ability for women to receive the fair and equal opportunities that all men currently have. A valued part of our current society is the openness of individuals to accept and work towards making a better and more fair society for all.
For example, Planned Parenthood said this about gender roles in today's society. Gender roles in a society means how we're expected to act, speak, dress, groom, and conduct ourselves based on our assigned sex. For example, girls and women are generally expected to dress in typically feminine ways and be polite, accommodating, and nurturing. Men are generally expected to be strong, aggressive, and bold.
Another quote that comes from CNN says, "For young children, it may start as acceptable to cross gender boundaries, but once it becomes clear that a behavior is socially defined as typical for the other sex, it is shunned out of fear of being ostracized." This exemplifies a different perspective on how society views gender.
Good point, Tucker. It also shows that since a young age, children have been groomed to follow the stereotypes that have been put into place for decades. If individuals were to stray away from these stereotypes, it would be seen as obscure and potentially wrong. Many people don't understand the true meaning of gender roles, making them blind to the idea of our current society. The current state of gender roles in today's society is an individual's ability to identify and fully embody whichever gender they choose. It is also about the fight for equality of opportunities between genders.
I agree. Our current society is working towards making a safe, fair, and equal environment for all people. There are people who seek equality and change as a negative reinforcement into our communities. That it would be more negative than it is positive. The positive changes root from the activists of women's rights and equality for all. This leads us to our next topic, future gender roles. So Grayson, what is your opinion on that?
In the future, gender roles and stereotypes should be accepted and understood a lot better than they have been. Everyone is entitled to be who they want and to do what brings them happiness. The future will bring more opportunities and advancements for all genders.
I agree. Kate Bornstein, a gender theorist, talks a lot about her perspectives on what gender in our society will look like in the future. At a New America event, she said, if there's a leading edge that is the future of gender, it is going to be one that understands that gender is relative to context.
And what does that mean to you?
To me, this means as society and people grow, the subject of gender roles is becoming more and more of an issue. As people become more accepting and learn more about gender roles, society will become more adapt to gender roles and gender stereotypes. Society is moving in the correct path of equality for all, so people who struggle to identify themselves as a specific gender will hopefully be treated more fairly.
Another good quote comes from Planned Parenthood, and they said, "There are actually images of female masculinity, trans men and trans women, now that didn't exist when I was in my teens and early 20s. In other words, we have gotten so far and we still have so far to go."
And Gracen, what does this mean to you?
Some people from the past and present still aren't used to the thought of an individual not being able to identify themselves as a specific gender because they simply aren't used to it or they don't understand the reasoning behind it. As society moves forward and times go on, more studies and data will hopefully show the people who disagree with the idea of gender roles to support them instead of bash them.
Anyways, in conclusion, gender roles greatly influence the world around us. It has been a relevant topic since Jane Austen's time and will remain a relevant topic for the rest of time. In the story, readers can draw comparisons between nature and the genders and how they are viewed differently by society. In Jane Austen's time, there are females subjugated by the views of society and those that try to escape from the inequalities of society.
It is clearly described that women do not possess as much power in society in relation to men. The idea of gender roles offer a clear image of how the relationships between different genders were at that specific point in time and how they are seen now. In today's society, and even in the near future, gender roles will be defined as equal and fair for all.
Thanks for listening.
Make sure to tune in next time.